Playing online and on smart devices. Now on London Scottie Radio, it's podcast time. I'm George Matlock. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us on this very day. And I'm very delighted to tell you, actually, that this is the first podcast of 2023. You've had a long wait, haven't you? But we've not been sitting on our hands, I assure you. We've been getting ready for the next big thing. And indeed, today I want to make a few quick announcements because a lot of things have happened in the last few months. So first of all, we've decided to retire Scottie MOT for the time being. It seems as though everybody's got very healthy Scottish Terriers, which we're obviously delighted by. And either that or they're ignoring the plight of their dogs, which I very much doubt, and I sincerely hope not. So that's the news there, that we've stopped getting inquiries by the truckload about things about around health and well-being questions around Scottish Terriers. So we have to assume on that basis that everybody is a happy family. Should we continue to get questions from you, the audience, and anyone, whether you're a London Scottie Club member or not, if you've got a question about Scottish Terriers, about their health or behavioural issues or whatever it is, you can always get in touch with us. So please do email us, info@londonscottie.club, and we'll be very happy to look into and research the question and have one of our co-presenters answer that on this very programme. But that's Scottie MOT. So what are we doing in 2023? Well, we've started off with a special edition today of Collared, and it's literally being prepared now and will be on air on Friday at 9 a.m. London time. But for this, we've had to go really, go the whole world. We've done a bit of globe-trotting. I don't mind telling you that the guest we've got today on the programme is somebody who desperately tried to get away from us and did his very best to try and stay away from us. Travelled a long way away from London. In fact, 13 time zones away, would you believe, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, I'm talking about New Zealand. That's the beautiful island, of course, which unfortunately has been in the headlines this very week for all the wrong reasons. And so it's our pleasure to, first of all, introduce, safe and well, I'm sure, Ed Gibbs. Ed, how are you, sir?
Thanks, George. Yes, it's an absolute pleasure to join the show today. I'm very well, thank you, and I'm joined by my little furry friend Nessie, is sat alongside, dutifully listening and making sure I don't say anything bad about her.
Okay, and how would she react if you did? Does she bite your finger or something?
Or she'd probably just do some low-level grumbling in that Scotty way.
Well, we'll be able to hear that because I know she's probably within microphone range as well. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome to you, and of course, welcome to Nessie. It's great to have you both on the programme. Now, Ed, you, of course, were originally in the UK. You were in London, I think, and you joined the club. Do you remember actually when it was?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So Nessie is just over 2 years old. I think she was born in December, and we picked her up in early February. And I think we joined the Scottie Club probably a couple of months after that. So sort of probably maybe 3-4 months after we got Nessie. So that would have been
early 2021
months or so ago.
Yeah, early 2021. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I've looked you up on the member directory. In fact, it's a good thing to remind people as well, because a lot of people, and I think you fell into this trap yourself actually, Ed, and I think I explained it to you. Even though you leave the UK, you are very much welcome to remain a member of London Scottie Club. We never turn our back on any member or their dogs, which are of course known as VIPs. In other words, very important pooches. And, we always like to hear from our members, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If something goes, terribly wrong or you need some help, you can always reach out. You can always get through to us on our WhatsApp group, which is exclusively for London Scottie Club members. So, Ed, with that, just wanted you to know you're very much part of our extended community, though I know that where you are, it is a different season and it's a different time of the year and everything else to what it is here in Europe. Let me ask you first of all about events in the last week, because
Sure.
the country's been through a lot of calamity. In your own words, what exactly happened?
Yeah, it has. So we've the country's been absolutely battered by tropical cyclone Gabrielle. There was a bit of uncertainty about how hard that weather event would hit the country, but it turned out it was pretty phenomenal, really. So New Zealand is split into two islands. There's the North Island, which contains the two biggest cities. That's Auckland and Wellington. Auckland's up right at the north, and Wellington's right down at the south of it. And then you've got the South Island, which is sort of 30 miles across the straits, and that's where Christchurch is, which is the city that was hit very hardly by the earthquake a few years ago. The storm, the most recent storm, absolutely battered the top of the North Island. Auckland was particularly badly impacted, as well as the surrounding areas, and also the east coast. Fortunately, the south of the South Island, including Wellington, which is where we are, was pretty lightly let off, really. That's not to say we didn't feel it. We had sort of 160 kilometres per hour winds, which many Wellingtonians assured me was pretty normal. That it's a very windy city; they're used to that type of gust. But there were some very heavy winds down here, and a lot of rain that just went on for hours and hours and hours. But for the rest of the country, what that's meant has been, unimaginable flooding, been massive disruption to transport networks and telecommunications networks. So it's very difficult for people to get in touch with people right across the country. Many New Zealanders are relying on national radio for updates on when they might get the power back on, whether the water's safe to drink, whether even family members are okay. So there has been huge disruption, and I think it's difficult to really underplay that. And very sadly, an increasing number of people have lost their lives. I think this morning it was reported that sort of 6 people have now died, and that number that Prime Minister has warned is set to rise as the rescue efforts continue. So it really has been a horrendous weather event.
Absolutely, and certainly from what you're saying there, the ramifications of this incident or this are still unfolding, right? So as you say, the latest reports about casualties, there could be more, obviously. This happened on, was it Monday, the start of this week, right? The cyclone.
Yeah, Sunday evening, Monday was the full brunt of it, really, and then the weather system's been quite sort of slow to move away. So the intensity of the weather has kind of cooled off, but it's rumbled on through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to be honest.
So this morning, which is now, I mean, you're 13 hours ahead of London.
Yes,
so
yeah.
where you are, it's when we're recording this, it's 8 a.m. Is it tranquil, or is it still quite strong gusts of wind?
It's still fairly strong gust of wind outside, but it's overcast. But it's fairly bright. It doesn't look like there's going to be any rain today. So hopefully, moving into the weekend, we'll be back for some good, what should be summer weather.
Okay, well, that's reassuring. Now, I know you've already taken Nessie out for her morning walk, and where you are, which I know is obviously a major metropolitan area, do you see the devastation all around you? I mean, are there sort of like roofs taken off the buildings, lampposts flattened on cars, that sort of thing?
As I say, Wellington, you wouldn't really know that there's been a major storm event despite those strong winds. As I say, it's a city that's really used to that kind of level of intensity.
Right.
So the buildings and the transport network are purposely designed to withstand a bit of a battering.
Right.
So you wouldn't notice it too much. The only effect really that I spotted here was when taking Nessie out for a morning walk on bin day. It looked rather like in London, where the foxes have been out and ripped everything open.
Right.
But fortunately, there's no foxes in New Zealand, but that was just the wind kind of tearing stuff all over the place.
Exactly. So it just looked like debris, basically, refuse debris scattered around.
Exactly.
I didn't know you don't have foxes. I know you don't have any creepy crawlies, apparently, on New Zealand.
Yeah, no, it's one of the many positive things about the country. There are no foxes, and also, as I'm sure many Scotties would be delighted to hear, there are no squirrels. So there are no native land mammals to New Zealand. So anything that is here has been introduced. So what we do have that in absolute abundance that Scotties love to chase are rabbits and hedgehogs.
Thank goodness for that.
Out for an evening walk yesterday, and we walked past a hedgehog that was literally the size of a football. because there are no predators here for them, so they grow absolutely enormously, but they do an awful lot of damage to the native wildlife as well. So actually, I think that people are encouraged to sort of hunt and trap rabbits and hedgehogs, whereas at home those animals are held in a bit more affection.
Well, that is certainly true. I have to say, hedgehogs, though, I wouldn't strongly recommend any dog to approach because of those prickly, bits. I mean, you can poke your eye out with it. I mean, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I wouldn't want my dog going anywhere near one, to tell you the truth. But thank goodness that there are rabbits and hedgehogs. Goodness me. I mean, what are the dogs going to do? It must be the most boring place on earth. I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, they can't get excited. No vermin? I mean, what's all this about? So it must be difficult. So they must be all getting very fat and bored. I mean, watching TV. What do Scotties do to pass the time in New Zealand?
Well, you might be surprised to hear there are very few Scotties here. We've seen one other since we got here, and you see very few around at all. I think you're probably talking, certainly there's well below 100 Scotties in the whole of the country.
Wow.
I would guess. Lots of the cousin Westies. See many of those. But very few Scotties. But no, it's a country that's quite different for the UK in terms of how friendly it is for dogs. Whereas at home and in London in particular, you can take your dog pretty much anywhere. You go to the pub, you can take the dog with you. New Zealand is not a country like that at all. There are lots of even high streets in smaller towns that will say no dogs. Lots of the big walks that you'd like to do out into the native bush, you're not allowed to take your dog with you. And that's all for very sensible reasons around kind of biodiversity protection, and they don't want people's dogs kind of catching native kiwi, which are a hugely endangered bird. But I think historically, dog owners in New Zealand they've had dogs for practical reasons. They tended to be farm dogs or working dogs, and it's only more recently that I think people have started to keep dogs more as pets. So lots of the dogs you see here are of the sort of Heinz 57 variety.
Yeah.
There are very few sort of pedigree breeds. As I say, you will see Westies, you'll see an awful lot of Schnauzers, the odd sort of Golden Retriever and Labrador, but otherwise it's pretty much farm dogs and general mixes. And I think for that reason, as dogs have only really sort of more recently become family pets here, that the country is certainly way behind where we are in the UK of welcoming dogs. But fortunately, there's plenty of beaches that they can run around on, and the local council is excellent actually at providing dog exercise areas, which are big fenced-in places that you can go and take your dog. So those are brilliant.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, New Zealand is mostly populated with, I was thought, people who are from generations of Brits, and yet the mindset is completely different. It's agriculture. Dogs were working. They're not seen as domesticated pets until recently. I find that absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Really interesting, and it's not entirely negative, I have to say. I think there's a real sense of how important it is to be a responsible dog owner here. So if you have a dog, you have to register the dog with the local council. You have to pay an annual fee. And personally, I think, particularly given the increasing number of dog attacks I've seen reported in the UK press, that sense of accountability for your own dog. Now, I'm sure everyone in the London Scottie Club is a responsible dog owner, but unfortunately, we know that there are people out there that don't perhaps take as much care and oversight of their dog as they should. So, being in a country where actually, it's really drilled into you and drilled into everyone that if you have a dog, you are responsible for it. It isn't allowed off the lead except in designated areas. You must pay a fee to the council so that they can invest in proper dog infrastructure. It's a very, very different way of doing things, but I have to say, from what I've seen so far, it seems to broadly work. It would be nice if Nessie could come to a few more pubs with us, but I'm sure we'll gradually find more friendly establishments. That's what we're here for.
I think when pub landlords start to wise up to the fact that they can actually generate a lot more revenue by inviting people in with their dogs, because people are not going to just come in for a swift half. They'll spend an afternoon or an evening there because the dog's with them. They'll wise up that there's an opportunity here not to be missed, and that's how business works, right? So they'll find a purpose for it, and then suddenly others will follow. Very, very, very interesting. And one thing I need to ask, you said that obviously people take it very seriously, accountability for their dogs and so on, and the registration process. But we have registration here in London and in throughout the UK. It hasn't stopped people's dangerous dogs from attacking and mauling children or elderly people, and we've seen the consequences. Yeah. Sadly, do you have incidents like that, and are they very severely punishable? Is that maybe the difference, that the penalties are much higher than they would be in the UK?
So I haven't really seen any reports of that sort of thing, to be honest. The rules, I think, here are very different on private land. So there are lots of farms up down here which are simply just enormous farms, because there's so much land for a relatively small population. I think only about 5 million people live in New Zealand, so smaller than the entire population of London. Mm. And I think people are quite entitled to have dogs that protect their land and livestock, and there may well be instances in that space. I haven't really seen any reports or instances of people being harmed by dogs in cities, but I think there are pretty stringent financial penalties in place. I haven't seen for if there is a dog bite, for example. I think then you're subject to legal action. But if a council officer sees you with your dog off the lead in a non-designated area, you will be slapped with a pretty significant fine straight away. Right.
And I presume that they also put down the dog that was the attacker, right? Or is that different to the way the UK?
I don't actually know, George, I'm afraid. I think it would really depend on the situation.
Yeah. I feel very sorry, actually. I know that's the law here in the UK, but I have to say that I've always felt it as a dog lover myself. I'm quick to blame the dog owner, not the dog, because dogs tend to do what they've been told to do and been trained to do, and they're always out to please their master. So I always find it very difficult to calculate in my mind that a dog would just go berserk just because it wanted to. That's not to say it could not happen, but who's to be judge and jury on that? How can you just have a rule that says, well, the dog has to be put down now? Yes, it's done something it shouldn't, but at the same time, where's the owner in all of this? I'm not suggesting we put down the owner, by the way, but you know what I'm trying to say, that there needs to be a sense of balance and proportion. And I kind of feel that in a way, it's like dealing with the symptom and not dealing with the cause.
No, I hear what you're saying there, and I think we all know our dogs are like sponges, and where they do tend to have behavioural issues, it's largely because we as owners have perhaps misunderstood them or haven't put in the time and effort to train and work with them properly.
Yeah.
And they need help to sort of overcome those issues. But on the flip side of that, if you know that your dog does have behavioural issues or reactivity issues, then as an owner, it's critically important that you take every step possible to make sure your dog isn't put in a situation where they might be caused to become aggressive and snap out.
That sounds like sound advice to me. We're just going to take a quick break.
Hello, I am Amy, and together with my friends Emma and Brian, we will be delivering website news from London Scottie Club in audio format. The advantages are that if you are out walking your dog, you can listen to the latest stories from London Scottie Club. This news service is in addition to London Scottie Radio podcasts, which you can listen to from this website or from podcast apps. Comment on how you find this news service. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to London Scottie Radio. I'm George Matlock, delighted to tell you we've got Ed Gibbs all the way from Windy City, Wellington in New Zealand, who's our special guest on Collared, the interview series. Now, I should say that we were actually hoping to have less pressure on you, Ed, and have two people as guests on this particular edition, but we were unfortunately not able to track down the other guest. Now, you know this already, Ed. Another member of London Scottie Club fled our shores even earlier than you did. I think you left, about 6 months to a year ago, right? I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also Claire Meehan. Now, Claire left, I think, these shores probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. It must be best part of. She was one of the earlier members to join London Scottie Club, which we launched in back in 2016, and she has a lovely dog called Ardbeg, and Ardy for short. Although it's not really short, but it's more affectionate perhaps. Anyway, so she's got a lovely dog called Ardy. Now, we were obviously very concerned on Tuesday when we heard the news in the morning of what had happened in New Zealand. So we first of all reached out to you, Ed, as you know, and you were able to reassure us that you and Nessie are fine and your family's fine. And then we also reached out to Claire, and she was actually able to send me a very short but very much appreciated message by us. She said, thanks so much for your kind message. Thankfully, we're all fine, apart from Ardy refusing to go out for a wee. And we're sending best wishes to us here in London. She then went on to say that Ardy is a fair weather Scottie dog. He laughs in the face of cold, but not rain. Now, we've not been able to get hold of her since, and it's a shame because I know that the messages are not getting through on WhatsApp. So we're obviously a bit concerned. Now, tell us about Claire, because she lives in the North Island as well, but she's up in Auckland, isn't she?
Yeah, she's up in Auckland, which as I said earlier, is part of the country that's been really sort of ravaged by the weather, and I'm sure you'll have seen as well. 2 weeks before this current event happened, there was some really biblical rain up there, which again tragically killed a couple of people and had devastating effects on the road network, transport network, and communications network. So just as Auckland was sort of picking itself back up from that weather event, then Cyclone Gabrielle came in. So it's been a real pounding for people up there. But Claire was immensely helpful for me and Nessie actually, and it was all credit to London Scottie Club. Otherwise, we wouldn't have ever come across each other. But when we found out we were wanting to move to New Zealand, we quite frankly didn't really know where to start in terms of taking the dog with us. It's a huge undertaking, and you feel very guilty, I suppose, as an owner, knowing that that's a real ordeal to put your dog through. And I think there's no sugarcoating it. Anyone who wants to travel with dogs should go into it with their eyes wide open. It's not going to be a pleasant experience for the animal. So you as an owner, I think, have a real responsibility to do your research and make sure that everything that can be done to make the process as smooth and as straightforward as possible is done. And that's where Claire was immensely helpful. So Claire recommended a company that helped her with the transport of Ardy, and was recommended to her, I think, by a Scottie owner out here in New Zealand. But the company itself were actually based in Guildford, so just down the road. So that was quite nice, dealing with people locally. And they were brilliant in helping us coordinate the transfer of Nessie over from London to New Zealand. And that process, just to clarify, sort of is a multi-month process. It starts at least 6 months before Nessie travelled. So you have to have all sorts of shots and injections, including sort of a rabies vaccine 6 months out. And then through that process, 6 months right up until the point of travel, there's sort of monthly blood tests and vet appointments and checkups and things like that to make sure that your dog is in good condition and not carrying any diseases that New Zealand don't have. I think the process is particularly arduous for New Zealand because the country is very concerned about its biosecurity.
Sure.
Touching on, like I mentioned before, about the fact that there are various sort of protective native animals here, and they've got quite a pristine natural environment that they're keen to preserve. So it all makes sense, but it makes the process quite arduous.
And was it expensive as well? Just out of interest, how much did you have to shell out?
It's very expensive. I think for the trap, it can be done for differing amounts. I think there's sort of, depending on how much you want to undertake and do yourself, you could probably do it for a little bit less money. But as I say, we didn't know where to start and really wanted that sort of expert help, telling us where, what needed to be done when, and getting sure all the paperwork was right, that sort of thing. But I think it broadly would probably, for a trip for a small size Scottie from New Zealand to London, would be, it's certainly upwards of between £3,000 and £5,000. So it's a lot of money.
Wow. And presumably similar rates going the other way from London to
yeah, exactly.
to
I
New
think
Zealand.
I think a little bit less coming back to the UK, obviously, because it's a country we're familiar with, and we'll probably feel a lot more comfortable sort of dealing with the government, doing the paperwork ourselves, type of thing. And as I say, the biosecurity requirements aren't quite the same. And she's already done the journey one way, so going
Right.
back is a bit more straightforward. But yeah, it's a lot of money, so not to be entered into lightly. And that's just, that's the financial impact on the owner, never mind the kind of emotional impact and the impact on the dog as well.
Indeed, which we'll come on to in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you very quickly. I mean, Claire is, and this is why it's unfortunate that we can't get through to her, and she's not aware that she's invited on this program. But I know that Claire has actually done the trip several times. I mean, she's probably told you this. I think she originally came with Ardy to London, and then they decided to go back to New Zealand. And so I think it's probably one of the best travelled Scotties that I know, because, I mean, what is the flight time from London to, say, to Wellington?
Good question. So there's a couple of different routes. I think you'd be lucky to do it in less than sort of 26 hours.
Wow.
There's the two routes so there aren't as many routes available for dogs as there are for humans. So maybe that's worth saying, actually. Nessie didn't travel on the same plane as us. So it seems to be Singapore Airlines are the airline that seems to specialise in shipping dogs, and shipping animals. So they have a special hold that's warm and comfortable for them. So Nessie went via Singapore. You can also fly the other way round. I think perhaps with Air New Zealand, actually, that goes via Vancouver. So Ness had a flight to Singapore, which I think is about 12 hours, and then a good sort of 12-hour break in Singapore, and then completed the journey from Singapore to Auckland. So two fairly long flights with a lengthy break in the middle.
Yeah, what a shame she didn't get to do any sightseeing. 12 hours in Singapore and not even a chance to look outside. What a shame.
I know,
It's a great place, Singapore. So it literally is a day and a bit for the dog to travel. And I would imagine this is quite stressful for the dogs. It's great that there are certain airlines, as you say, that specialise in this sort of thing and provide warm quarters for the dogs, because I know that my biggest concern always is that they get treated like cargo, and therefore they're in very, very cold conditions in that hold. But presumably that's not the case for what Nessie experienced. What was it like for her? Because she's separated for you for more than a day, and not to mention the fact that you've still got to fly there yourself. I mean, you must have been separated for quite a while. I'm sure for you it was stressful. I'm sure for animals it must be pretty difficult as well.
Yeah, it was. And as I say, no owner should enter into that kind of thing lightly. Like, it can't be sugarcoated. It's not. I don't think it is a pleasant experience. But so Nessie left the UK, I think 4 days before we did. So we knew that she'd landed in New Zealand before we started our journey. When she got here, she then had to quarantine for 10 days as well. So you have to factor that in terms of longer separation. We were always fairly confident that she'd be fine with being away from us. She's always been I'm sure many Scotty owners will identify with this. She's always been fairly independent. She likes to be in the same room with us, but would prefer to be, in her bed in the corner with a beady eye on us rather than in amongst us on the sofa. So she's always been sort of taken herself off when she's had enough and gone and stayed in her crate. And we've crate trained her ever since she was a puppy. And I think that was actually really helpful for this sort of thing, because they travel in a crate. It's not your sort of standard domestic crate. It's a special, specially made sort of fairly sturdy wooden crate that we had delivered to our house sort of a month before she travelled. So we got her used to that before. And I think that was really helpful. But yeah, it's a lot of time to be spent alone. And then, as I say as well, the quarantine on the other side. Broadly, she's handled it pretty well, I think. Unfortunately, she got kennel cough in quarantine, despite being vaccinated against it and that sort of thing. So, these things happen. There's not an awful lot you can do. But it just meant that while she was able to mix with us on the other side, we had to then keep her away from other dogs for, I think, another sort of 3 weeks or so until that virus was no longer infectious. And what we have noticed following the move is she's become a little bit more highly strung, and certainly she's more reactive to other dogs, which is something that we're slowly working with her to get her back to what she was like when we had her in London, where she was very happy to kind of run up and be sniffed by other dogs and all sorts. But I think that the ordeal of the travel, compounded by the fact that then she wasn't able to mix with other dogs for a few weeks in this strange new country, has just made her a little bit more wary and cautious.
That's a very interesting observation. It's unfortunate, of course, but still something that you've noticed in her behaviour that has changed, and presumably it's not fading away, right? It's like a gear shift for her.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just something that we're going to have to work through with her and build up her confidence a bit more, and we're in a few weeks' time. I think we're going to try and do some work with a trainer and perhaps go along to some socialisation classes again. So all the stuff that many people will have done as a puppy,
doing it again.
We're probably just going to have to go back there again.
And we're going to do something again now. We're going to have another break. Stay right there.
This is Jenny. I listen to London Scottie radio podcasts when walking my lovely Scottie Logan. It's the perfect accompaniment to a leisurely dog walk.
I'm Elaine. I like to listen to London Scottie podcast while chilling with a glass of wine and preparing dinner.
It's Max here. I listen to the podcasts in the bubble bath for fab tips.
This is Zelda. I like to do lino cuts of Scotties. That's what I do when I'm listening to the podcast. I listen to them for inspiration.
This is Fraser, the London Scottie Club podcast. It's a great way to end the day.
Thank you, Fraser. I couldn't agree more. You can also start your day, as is Ed here, who's all the way in New Zealand in a completely different time zone to us. It's evening here, and of course it's morning glory in New Zealand. But it's not been a great start to the week. As we heard everyone around the world, it's become a global story. New Zealand hit by a natural disaster. And is only just now basically coming to grips with the extent of the emergency. I should also mention that it's only the third time in the history of New Zealand that the country has been declared as an emergency zone, and that is quite remarkable. Okay, so Ed, thank you for being on the show. We've just got a few minutes left, and then I'll let you get ready for your weekend as it beckons. So the move to New Zealand obviously was not without its costs, emotional as well as financial. My question is, would you come back to the UK, or are you done with the UK? You want to stay in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've made this move thinking it's going to be sort of medium term, temporary. As I say, our plans at the moment are to come back. Obviously, it's a very long way away, and we've got family and friends in the UK at varying stages of life. So we do at the moment certainly intend to come back. That said, we've only been here for sort of 4 months or so at the moment, and as we continue to get more and more stuck into life here, if we love it, we'll see what happens. We might end up staying a little bit longer.
Okay, fantastic. And was it work? Do you mind me asking? Was it work, or were you just looking for a new way of life?
A bit of both, to be honest. We first came here sort of 6 years ago, and were lucky enough to spend sort of 6 weeks here, and absolutely loved it, and have always wanted to live and work abroad. And then, as we all know, the pandemic hit, and we thought, right, well, that's not going to happen for a while. So we put that dream on the back burner. In the interim, ended up with delightful little Nessie, and thought, right, this is even less likely to happen.
Or more settled, yeah.
Exactly. But then we just thought, if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. So we thought, right, let's go. So it was mainly driven by sort of just personal. It's always been a dream for my wife and I, and we've been fortunate enough that our work situation has allowed us to follow that dream.
Fantastic. And you're both, but from I can tell from your voice, both young people. So if you're going to do it, this is the time to do it, right? You don't wait until you're old and unable to travel and whatnot. So you've taken the bull by the horns, and it looks like Nessie is starting to enjoy herself over there. But obviously, very interesting that what you said about how this experience has affected her, and obviously the podcast, as we call it, is mostly focused on our beloved dogs. Nessie, I know, is your treasure, and it's great that that you've probably added a 1% to the 99 other Scotties that were already there by bringing her over. It's great to hear that there are at least some other Scotties over there, but fascinating about the kind of landscape you've got. The kind of for dogs. I mean, the fact that. There's been a big sort of adjustment in why people actually have dogs of any particular type. The fact that there aren't that many pedigree dogs. I think this is really fascinating to hear all of this. But it sounds like it's all going in the right direction, and hopefully, there is a charity or a protection for against cruelty to animals, and particularly to dogs. I hope there is something like that. Is there?
Yeah, there is actually. It's called the SPCA. Sounds very familiar to the RSPCA, and they're very big here. So they have lots of charity shops around the country, and big following, and also, as I say, because of that fee that people pay annually to their local council as responsible dog owners, the local council does also provide some quite extensive provision for, depending on which council you're in, but for rescue dogs as well.
Right, and just putting everything into context, although you're on the other side of the world and there's so many things which are so different, there are a few things which are the same. I mean, you happen to share the same head of state as us, don't you?
We do, yeah, absolutely.
King Charles III is your king as well as ours. Super. Look, it's absolutely a delight to have you on the programme, Ed. And I know you've had to speak for yourself, but also you've made some comment there for Claire. We hope that she's okay, and I hope that she manages to somehow get to hear this podcast, or maybe that you can reach out to her. We wish you both every success, obviously, in your continued endeavours in New Zealand. But don't be strangers. Remember, you're very much welcome. You're still part of the club, and you're very welcome to connect with other Scottie members if you so wish. Time zones permitting, obviously. It's just been really good to be able to talk to you and to hear firsthand what has been going on in New Zealand, and it really has been upsetting for so many of us here. But I can tell you, we had lots of also well wishes on WhatsApp. So we had people, clasping hands together, showing prayers, wishing, hoping the best for you guys. And for your country, and it's a country I've yet to visit, I have to say, but I've got friends who live out there. And I really, really hope to be able to go out there at some point, and perhaps to meet some of you guys while I'm out there. So don't be in a rush to come back if you're enjoying yourselves.
Absolutely. Well, if ever you're here, you're always more than welcome for a walkabout.
That sounds like that's an invitation. I'm going to hold you to account on it, and we have it recorded now, so you can't buckle. Okay, Ed, thank you very much. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to London Scottie Radio. This and all our podcasts are available online at londonscottie.club. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe to us from your favourite podcast player app. Also visit us on YouTube for fun videos. And if you have a Scottish Terrier in London or nearby, be sure to join us.